Budweiser puts rice in its beer? If you've ever heard a craft beer fan talk about this, you know the verdict. Cheap filler. A shortcut. The cardinal sin of brewing. But rice costs more than corn. Every other major American brewer uses corn. Budweiser chose the expensive adjunct and has stuck with it since 1876. The reason isn't taste preference. It's chemistry. American barley carries too much protein. Brew with it alone and the beer turns cloudy. Rice absorbs the excess protein and delivers the clarity that European lagers are famous for. So the rice isn't a shortcut, it's a calculated solution. But as it turns out, the chemistry of the ingredients is only half the story behind how this beer actually came to be. The man who started it all wasn't a brewer. Eberhard Anheuser made soap and candles in St. Louis. In 1860, a small brewery defaulted on money it owed him. Anheuser took over the operation to recover his debt. The beer was terrible. He had no idea how to fix it. Then, Adolphus Busch walked through the door. A young German immigrant selling brewing supplies, hops, malt, equipment. He fell in love with Anheuser's daughter Lily. They married in 1861. Within a few years, Busch bought into the brewery. Anheuser had the money. Busch had the vision. But Budweiser wasn't their idea. Karl Conrad, a St. Louis wine importer and Busch's close friend, had traveled through Bohemia and tasted the pilsners of Budweiser. He contracted Busch to brew a Bohemian-style lager. The recipe used 23.5% rice, a blend of American and European hops, and a secondary fermentation technique borrowed from Czech tradition. Conrad trademarked the name. Budweiser was his brand. It worked. Conrad expanded fast. Too fast. By January 1883, he couldn't cover his debts. He owed Anheuser Busch $94,000. To settle, he handed over the trademark. Budweiser changed hands through bankruptcy, not strategy. By 1901, it was 65% of everything Anheuser Busch sold. That original recipe hasn't changed in principle, but what happens inside the brewery today would be unrecognizable to Conrad. It starts with two grains on opposite sides of the same mill. Barley gets cracked gently. The husks stay intact because later they'll become the filter bed that separates liquid from grain. Rice gets the opposite treatment, milled to a near powder so it dissolves fast. Then comes the step that sets Budweiser apart, dual mashing. 2 vessels, 2 jobs running at once. In the cereal cooker, rice goes in with about 7% malt. The mixture boils for 15 minutes. The starch granules inside the rice absorb water, swell, and burst. Dry white grains become a thick, translucent paste, the consistency of hot porridge. The smell is flat and starchy, almost like wet cardboard. Only now can enzymes attack it. In the mash tun, barley sits at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Protease enzymes break down the excess protein that 6-row American barley carries, the protein that would cloud the finished beer. Then, the merge. Hot rice mash gets pumped into the barley mash. Temperature climbs to 145 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit. Amylase enzymes from barley chop every starch molecule, barley and rice alike, into fermentable sugar. Rice brings starch. Barley brings enzymes. Neither makes beer alone. Here's what most people never consider. Every harvest, barley and rice specs change. Anheuser-Busch's pilot brewery evaluates every new crop, recalculates the blend, and sends adjusted parameters to every production brewery worldwide. The recipe is never exactly the same twice. After mashing, the sugary liquid separates from grain through a process called lautering. For decades, Anheuser-Busch used their own invention, the Strainmaster, a trough-shaped vessel from the 1950s that drained faster and took half the floor space of traditional equipment. But it sacrificed 5 to 8% of the sugar extract. They eventually killed their own creation when lauter tuns proved more efficient. Spent grain, roughly 2 million pounds per day, gets recycled as cattle feed. Then boiling. Hops go in at staged intervals, early for bitterness, middle for flavor, late for aroma. The bill includes Hallertau, Saaz, Tettnanger, and Hallertauer tradition, a variety bred at Bavaria's Hill Hop Research Institute specifically for Anheuser-Busch. After the boil, the wort runs through a thin film stripping column. Hot, sterile air pulls out dimethyl sulfide, the cooked corn off flavor, faster and more precise than simply boiling longer. Fermentation runs 21 days at 45 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than most lagers. That warmth coaxes out a faint apple note most people can't name, but would miss if it disappeared. Every off flavor in brewing is just a flavor you didn't intend. Budweiser intends the apple. But here's the thing nobody explains about rice in beer. Corn is cheaper, corn is easier to process. Corn is what every other major American brewer uses. And corn works. It dilutes protein just fine. But corn leaves a trace. A faint sweetness, a roundness on the tongue, a ghost of flavor that the brewer didn't put there on purpose. Rice leaves nothing. Zero flavor contribution. It delivers starch to the enzymes, takes the excess protein with it, and vanishes. The finished beer tastes only of what the brewer intended. Malt, hops, yeast, water. Nothing else. That absence is the entire point. Budweiser's recipe isn't optimized for cost. It's optimized for control. Rice is the one adjunct that lets the brewer decide exactly what the drinker tastes, because rice itself has no opinion. Now, the phrase you've heard 100 times, Beechwood aged. It sounds like wine resting in oak barrels, soaking up wood character over months. The reality is the opposite. American beechwood is cut into thin spiral strips, then boiled in baking soda for 7 hours, specifically to strip out every trace of flavor. The wood is deliberately made tasteless. The strips sit on the floor of horizontal lagering tanks. Yeast settles onto the wood, increasing surface contact with the beer. That yeast scrubs out acetaldehyde and diacetyl, green apple, and butter off flavors that ruin lagers. Anheuser-Busch has admitted ceramic tiles would work just as well. But ceramic tile aged doesn't sell beer. Beechwood was chosen because it's the most flavorless wood available, the same reason it's used for popsicle sticks. The wood adds nothing. The yeast does everything. Crack open a can of Budweiser this summer. That hiss is carbon dioxide escaping, the last trace of a fermentation that ran 3 weeks in a tank lined with flavorless wood. Take a sip. What you taste is malt, a whisper of hops, and a faint apple sweetness so subtle most people file it under cold or refreshing without ever naming it. What you don't taste is everything the brewery spent a century learning to remove. The protein that would have clouded it. The sulfur compound that would have made it smell like creamed corn. The green apple sharpness and the buttery slick that would tell your tongue something went wrong. The barley that made this batch isn't the same barley that made last year's. The rice isn't either. Anheuser-Busch buys 6 to 9% of the entire American rice crop every year and recalibrates the recipe each harvest to hit the same target. You're drinking a moving formula designed to taste like it never changes. That sameness isn't laziness. It's the hardest thing in brewing, making a living recipe hold still. Rice and beer. Not a shortcut, not a cost cut. A solution to a chemistry problem most people don't know exists. That's the process. We reveal how things actually work, one story at a time. If there's something you'd like us to explore next, let us know. Until then, trust the process.